Where does every starting quarterback in the NFL rank halfway through the 2023 NFL season? What's up, BLV football fans? It's Mitch here with my mid-season quarterback tier rankings, ranking every starting quarterback in the NFL from the worst backup quality players to the best, the MVPs of the NFL at the quarterback position. It's my first mid-season rankings video. I'm also going to be ranking every head coach in the NFL. Let me know in the comments section below where you would rank your favorite quarterback in the league and your favorite team's starting quarterback. Let me know in that comment section below. Gronk spike the like button. Don't forget to subscribe, and let's begin ranking every quarterback in tiers. Let's go. Let's rank some QBs. You know how the categories work. I don't really need to explain them. MVP means elite. Very good means they're close to elite, but something's missing. Good means they're above average. Mid means they're average. Below average, well, it means they're below average. Incomplete means I haven't really seen enough for me to actually give a grade. And I don't really want to say they suck, and I don't want to say they're great. So this is incomplete. Basically, backup means a different way of saying they're absolute trash, but I don't really want to be mean. And then backups is basically the guy as a backup, but I don't think there's going to be anyone really in that category. We'll see, though. We'll see how it goes. We have a lot of quarterbacks here. I'm only really going to rank the ones that I've seen and that have played. There are like a lot of quarterbacks on this list. So we're not going to do Aaron Rodgers. Hopefully he has a great recovery. Aiden O'Connell. I guess I'll do Aiden O'Connell. That's kind of a fun one. Why not? So far, it's a little bit incomplete. And the reason I'm going to put him here instead of like backup is because I actually see some potential in Aiden O'Connell. I liked what I saw in the preseason. I like what I saw in his start against the Chargers. He did turn the football over, had some fumble issues. But what I like about O'Connell, he's got great size and arm strength. His arm strength pops in a way that I don't think Jimmy Garoppolo's does for that offense. So he's worth ranking. He's worth keeping an eye on for the Raiders moving forward. I'd like to see if the Raiders start losing some games, give this guy a chance. I think he can play a little bit. Andy Dalton, I'm also going to rank him because he played in a game this year, and he played quite well, so he deserves it. I actually think that Andy Dalton is better than people give him credit for at this point in his career. I think he's actually the best quarterback on Carolina right now, and he's just not playing because he wasn't the first overall pick, and they didn't spend multiple draft picks to move up in the draft to pick him. So Andy Dalton, to me, is actually kind of below average. I'm not going to lie. He's below average. The game that he played against Seattle was pretty impressive this year, and last year for the Saints, he was just as good as what Derek Carr is doing. So don't sleep on the Red Rifle, man. He had a pretty good last couple of years when he's been on the field. Anthony Richardson, the problem with him is he hasn't been on the field. It's definitely an incomplete grade. He has great potential, can run, super athletic, cannon for an arm, actually showed a lot of pocket presence. That was one of the things I liked about him in college. I really questioned his mechanics, his processing speed, and there's some things that definitely he needs to work on, but he does appear, if he can get his health sorted, that he can be a franchise guy, and he has a lot of potential moving forward. Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield, I would say, is below average. I think at times he's played good. I think at times he's played average, mid. I think at other times he's played below average. I think the more we see him in this offense with these weapons, the more we kind of miss Tom Brady in that offense. You know, if they had Tom Brady right now, I think this Bucs team would be 5-1 maybe. I mean, Baker Mayfield has had some good games. He's made some nice throws. But at times he holds on the ball too much and takes kind of dumb sacks. Situationally in 2-minute drives, he's not very good. And at times, he just misses receivers. At other times, he can make big throws down the field. He does have a good arm. He's shown savviness to escape and run at times. And I like his personality. But I think overall, we kind of know what Baker is. He can be serviceable. He is an NFL talent as a starter. But I don't really see him as a guy that you're going to win a lot of games with. Then, we didn't really see much of Bailey Zappi. So I'm going to move forward. Let's go to Brian Hoyer, who did play. I'm going to go with he's a backup. Brian Hoyer is basically, as Dirk Kant put it to me today on BLV vs. Consensus, exclusively on Patreon, he is basically a bad version of Jimmy G, or a lesser version of Jimmy G. Hoyer knows McDaniel's offense. He knows the scheme. He can get through his reads, get through the progressions. He's a smart guy. He can't make a lot of the throws. And that's his issue. That's why he's a backup. Doesn't have the arm strength, doesn't really push the ball down the field, and doesn't have mobility. So he doesn't bring any plus traits to the table. He's basically always been a backup. There was one spurt in his career with the Browns where he was pretty good. But other than that, he's been a backup. Brock Purdy. This one's really interesting. I'm going to put Brock Purdy in the good category. I think he is an above average player. And the reason I would say he's an above average quarterback is because he has very good processing speed. He sees the field exceptionally well. He's decent when the play breaks down, and he always tends to make the right decision. He's also pretty accurate. I actually think his accuracy is overrated. I think what's good about Purdy, his anticipation, his processing, his ability to go through Kyle's offense and then make the right decision and be mostly accurate with the ball. I think there's times where his great talents at receiver bail him out from maybe slightly inaccurate passes, but they still make the catch anyways. And I think his most underrated trait is his legs. He's very savvy in and outside the pocket at maneuvering under pressure. So Purdy will continue to grow. I expect him to get to a top 10 level at some point in his career. I don't think he's there yet, though. He would also impress me more if he did more in the fourth quarter with the game on the line. I will say that. Want to see that out of him. Bryce Young. Bryce Young is kind of incomplete. I would honestly say right now he's basically a backup, but I think he'll get to the mid-range in his career and potentially the good range in his career. But right now I'm going to say incomplete. I still just haven't seen enough from Bryce Young, and especially because I haven't really seen him with a good offensive line or a good weapon group. I haven't seen him with a scheme that actually works towards his strengths. I think everything about the Bryce Young fit didn't work for me for day one in Carolina. I just don't really see how he fits in Frank Reich's offense. He's never had a quarterback like him before. And I'm still figuring out what Bryce Young brings to the table in terms of the upper echelon skills that you drafted him for. And you guys know I wasn't super high on Bryce. He was my number 2 quarterback in the draft, and he was closer to 3 than he was 1. I had him closer to Richardson than I had to Stroud. And a lot of that had to do with size, a lack of true mobility that would be a good trait in the NFL. His mobility stood out, his quickness stood out in college, but you had to understand that those defensive linemen were a lot quicker and faster and freakier in the NFL. And I think that's a big thing that he's trying to understand in this league. He's going to have to be better from the pocket. I'm not sure if he'll ever become an upper echelon pocket passer, but he's going to have to get better to be a good quarterback in this league. Right now, I don't have a complete grade, and I think that's fair. Next, we've got CJ Stroud, and I do have a complete grade with CJ Stroud, at least to the degree to rank him above incomplete. And that would be that CJ Stroud has been good. CJ Stroud is a good quarterback, and you could argue he's been very good. There's certainly an argument for that, and potentially by the end of this video, I'll change my mind. But CJ Stroud, what's been super impressive, he has upper echelon mechanics. His accuracy is already elite, and his arm strength is definitely up there as well. But on top of that, his composure in the pocket, his calmness, and his ability to read the field with very good anticipation for when to throw the football is exceptional for a rookie. So Stroud is one of those rare rookies that appears to actually be elevating his team. That is very rare. We haven't seen that very often. Andrew Luck, Justin Herbert, you could argue maybe a couple others over the last few years, but like there's not that many. If you want to include Dak, maybe. But like it feels like Stroud is really that special, and you could argue very good, and I wouldn't really argue against it. Dak Prescott, I think overall Dak Prescott is a good quarterback, and you could argue at times very good. Like the Chargers game, he was very good. Now, part of that is he started to use his legs. He started to move around. He started to make plays on the move, escaping pressure. He actually started scrambling. There was a couple designed runs for him to get going, and that's what we saw from Dak Prescott. And when he uses his legs, he takes himself from a good quarterback to a very good quarterback. And that's what I've seen continuously throughout his career. When Dak begins to extend plays, he is a very good quarterback, but he doesn't always do that. And it feels like whenever he's facing a defense that has a good combination of aggressive man physical coverage on the outside and a good solid pass rush, he does tend to struggle. And I'm not sure exactly why that is, but it has been a theme for me throughout the years. On top of that, Dak is just a little shakier than I would like in terms of his ability to get the ball down the field and his consistency with accuracy. At times, feels like his mechanics, his feet can be a little bit off, and he doesn't always get the ball to where it needs to go on some of the outside the numbers throws and things of that nature. But when he's clicking and when everything's operating up here, he's an exceptional quarterback that you can certainly win a lot of games with. Next, we have Daniel Jones. Right now, I would have to put Daniel Jones into basically backup category. That might be pretty harsh to say because I was pretty high on Daniel Jones last year, but I think what we've seen is Daniel Jones, yes, has had one of the worst offensive lines in the league. And yes, his support staff at the wide receiver position has not been good. But we saw Tyrod Taylor, who is a backup in this league. I would put him in the backup category. Is Tyrod Taylor on here? Because I would just insert him there right now. Tyrod Taylor. So he's a backup. All right. Tyrod Taylor is a backup. He has come into play for Daniel Jones, and he has been better than Daniel Jones. So I guess based on this year, you would actually put Daniel Jones at this level, basically a backup. But he is basically a backup because he is a backup, but Tyrod has enough skills, mobility, experience, doesn't turn the ball over to the point where you like him starting with a good defense. And we've seen that throughout Tyrod's career. And to me, Daniel Jones and Tyrod Taylor, there's been no change, no difference between the two. No difference. If anything, Daniel has basically turned the ball over more than Tyrod Taylor. And that's all it's been. And Tyrod's made some big throws down the field at times. Derek Carr is up next. Derek Carr has been below average to me. I would say because he's been decent throughout the 20s. You know, you watch him and he'll make some nice balls through the 20s. But there's really no difference for me watching the Saints with Andy Dalton and the Saints with Derek Carr. I think part of my problem with Derek Carr right now, well, the first and foremost, he's the worst red zone quarterback in the NFL. His brain freezes. He can't make a decision. And at other times, the thing that's really turning me off to Derek Carr is part of the leadership deal where it feels like his team is not behind him. There's something going on with his receiving core, Chris Olave. Some of these guys just feel like they're not in sync with Derek Carr, and it feels off. So I don't know if that's all on Derek Carr or what, but I feel like sometimes can make erratic decisions under pressure, too prone to check the ball down, doesn't make enough throws in big situations to win the game, and is really bad in the red zone. All of those things I would say about Derek Carr keep him below average. Deshaun Watson has been a backup this year. Deshaun Watson, in other words, has been putrid. He stinks. There is nothing about his game that has really been good. I guess he can still run it a little bit at times, but he is inaccurate. He's indecisive. He doesn't anticipate. He turns the ball over. He waits too long in the pocket and gets sacked or strip sacked. The man is lost. Something's going on with his head. Desmond Ridder, I would call him basically a backup. I would say there's been some progress for Desmond Ridder as a passer. Atlanta fans were all over me in the offseason about Ridder, give him a chance, Ridder this, Ridder that. And I would argue that if you had even like a guy that was mid, you would be a really good football team in the NFC South. But you have Desmond Ridder, who at times has turned the ball over too often, fumble rooskies. He's been intercepted far too many times this year. For a quarterback that's just expected to manage the game, Ridder makes too many mistakes. On top of that, his athleticism is fine, but not really a plus trait. I like his size. I like his mentality. I like him, but I just feel like, yeah, he's growing in terms of accuracy, in terms of anticipation, in terms of seeing the field, in terms of understanding NFL defenses. I just don't know if he's there from a pure passing standpoint, and I don't think he brings enough to the table from a rushing standpoint to ever be a true solution as a starting quarterback. So I'd say he's basically a backup. Gardner Minshew is next up. We didn't really see Drew Lock long enough to rank him, so I'm gonna or Thompson Robinson. So I'm gonna go Gardner Minshew. Gardner Minshew. I'm gonna go with, this is tough. I'm gonna say below average. I feel like putting him alongside Derek Carr and Baker Mayfield would probably be pretty accurate. I like Minshew. I think actually more so than a Derek Carr. He's, I think, a good leader. I think he provides a spark to his team no matter where he's been at any point. I think he's an exceptional backup because at any point when your starter goes down, he's ready to play, and he often plays well. The problem with Minshew is typically when teams scout him, they can point out his physical flaws, which oftentimes are his arm strength and his size. And I feel like when you get pressure, especially up the middle on him, it's tough for him to really make good throws. And I would say that Minshew just doesn't really have enough in terms of arm strength, size, or speed to overcome his, lack of other traits. But I really like his accuracy. I think he's very on time. I think he's a very savvy scrambler. Not an excellent one, but a savvy one. Makes subtle plays. And he often protects the ball. So I've got Minshew at below average. Geno Smith is next. I would call Geno mid so far this year. I don't think he's been good. I don't think he's been bad. I think Geno, from a trait standpoint, is better than mid. He's got a very good arm. He can run and scramble. And he's got a very strong foundation in the pocket. He always throws from a strong structure, and he has good mechanics, and I think that enables him to be very accurate, especially down the field. But the thing with Geno for me is it feels like his decision-making this year has been a little erratic. I feel like there's big moments in the game, especially in the red zone, where he hasn't been able to make plays. So I just feel like he hasn't really been a plus for Seattle this year. I don't know if there's ever really been a game, maybe Detroit, where he's been like, wow, that was Geno of last year. I feel like mostly he's just been okay. So that's why I put him in the mid category. Next up, haven't seen Jacoby Brissett yet. Just want to say on Jacoby Brissett, wouldn't be shocked if he gets traded at the deadline, because I do feel like Sam Howell is the guy in Washington. I'd like to see Jacoby get a chance rather in Tennessee or Cleveland or something like that. But look out for him. Jalen Hurts is up next. Jalen Hurts, I would say, has been very good. I wouldn't put him in the MVP category. I'd put him in the very good because I think obviously he's one of the best situations in the NFL. He's got a great offensive line, a great receiving core. He's an exceptional leader, which is, I think, the thing that I really like about him. And I've always liked about him dating back to college. And I think the standout trait for him, the truly elite trait, is his physical power. I don't think we've seen a guy with the power of Jalen Hurts since Cam Newton. Like, his leg power is insane. His ability to drive on the tush push is special. And I think that combination of just knack to make a play with pure physical power is unmatched. On top of that, the reason I hold him back from being MVP is at times he hasn't been great as a passer this year. He's turned the ball over too much. For a guy that has a lot of time in the pocket to make decisions, He does tend to hold on to the ball and does tend to turn the ball over lately too much for my liking. I could understand it more if he was under constant duress, but he's not. So that's part of it. Then on top of that, early in the year, he was not the greatest passing the ball. Some of that might have been schematic. Some of that might have been injury related. But he's been a little up and down as a passer. But overall, he's very, very good. Can win the Super Bowl. Could win an MVP one of these years. I just don't think it's this year. Next up, we haven't seen much of Jameis, although we could down the road. Jared Goff. I would call Jared Goff very good. I think Jared Goff has been exceptional this year. I think he's been, like at times I feel like Purdy and Stroud and Dak have been next to Goff. But I feel like the whole year Goff has been pretty darn steady. Very, very good. I've always thought that Jared Goff was underrated from a physical standpoint. I think his arm strength is certainly there. There's a reason he was first overall pick. His ability to throw crossers and middle of the field routes is at the top of the NFL. He's got really consistent mechanics and accuracy. And the only thing that really throws Jared Goff off is having to play in a consistent drop back passing game where he's under pressure. I think we saw that in the Baltimore game. Other than that, I don't necessarily feel like Goff is working with the best set of weapons in the NFL, so I can't really say that it's his weapons. There's some good players there, don't get me wrong, but it's not like it's Miami or Philadelphia. And then he's got a really good scheme, but I also wouldn't call it a Shanahan or McDaniel level scheme. So I feel like Goff has just been very good and has done what he had to do to win a lot of these games. He only really has had one bad game, and I wouldn't really put that on Jared Goff. Next, Jimmy Garoppolo. I would say Jimmy Garoppolo has been, this is tough. Honestly, I think Jimmy Garoppolo has basically been a backup. This is tough for me to say because I've usually been Jimmy Garoppolo is kind of mid guy. I've usually said that about Jimmy G. But I honestly think it's not only removing him from Kyle's system, but it's also, I think he's regressed a little bit as a physical talent. I think he's never been exceptional in terms of arm strength or accuracy, but I feel like there's been better moments for him throughout his career. I also just don't see what he brings to the table physically or mentally for that matter that makes him a mid quarterback at this point. His accuracy in the middle of the field and his release are strengths. Other than that, his downfield passing ability is pretty much non-existent, which is such a hindrance to an offense that it allows defenses to play the run game and to clamp down on underneath routes. He really has zoned in on only 2 targets this year, being Devontae Adams and Jacoby Myers. He has actually hurt his run game because of the lack of a downfield attack. And he doesn't really throw the ball outside the numbers very well. On top of that, he turns the ball over at a league high rate, and he really can't escape pressure. So he's a sitting duck that has a very limited range of passing. So to me, I just feel like Jimmy, although he is handsome, it has basically been a backup this year and very replaceable for the Raiders outside of that Bears game. Next up, we've got Joe Burrow. This might be controversial. I feel like Joe Burrow has been mid this year. I don't really see how you can argue he's been Joe Burrow of old. He's had moments of that, the Cardinals game, moments in the Seahawks game, moments in the Ravens game. He hasn't pieced it together yet. I fully expect him to get to the level of Joe Burrow in the past. But you have to wonder with Joe Burrow, like, the injury thing with him, it makes him such a lesser quarterback compared to the rest of the quarterbacks when they're dealing with a small injury. Maybe these injuries are more serious than I give them credit for. But when Mahomes is hurt, he's still a pretty elite quarterback. When Allen is hurt, he's still a pretty elite quarterback. When Jalen Hurts is hurt, he's still a pretty elite quarterback. Even guys in the past, even when they've been dealing with something, it feels like they've still played to the relative level. Feels like with Joe Burrow, I don't know if it's an arm strength thing, if it's a mobility thing. Whenever he's hurt, he is a different player. to the point where he is not good at times. Like, he is bad. So I think we saw that early in the year, but he's steadily progressed. So he'll certainly rise on this list. But right now I have to put him in the mid category. Jordan Love, I would argue, has basically been a backup this year. There's been times where he's been pretty good, but I think most of his good moments have been system-based. The Bears game, the Falcons game, the Saints comeback was the best we've seen from Jordan Love, making big-time throws, not having a care in the world, throwing the ball down the field, trying to make plays, pushing the ball down the field. He does have arm strength. He does have a little mobility. He does have a slick release. He can throw from a multitude of angles. But the biggest problem for me with Jordan Love that I think goes overlooked, it's not a mental thing to me, it's a mechanical thing. And what I see with Jordan Love is consistently inconsistent mechanics throwing the football, which I think impacts his mental processing, because when he sees a receiver that is covered but maybe a little open to make a throw, he's not willing to make that throw. And I think big-time quarterbacks in the past, like an Aaron Rodgers, would zip the ball in there due to their accuracy and their understanding of they can get that ball there. It feels like Love isn't playing with that confidence, which is certainly something that might be able to grow within him. But to me, Love has just been too inaccurate this year. Josh Allen has been, to me, an MVP. He's been one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL consistently this year. I would say he had a bad game against the Jets. Otherwise, overall, I can't recall him playing bad. He was unbelievable against Miami. I thought he was very, very, very good against the Bucs on Thursday night. He didn't play great against New England, but I actually feel like that was more about the offensive line not playing well and him having to overcome that than anything else, and his defense playing very poorly. So I think overall, if you removed Josh Allen from the Bills, they would be a bad football team. I think what we've seen from them this year, their defense is steadily regressing. Their offensive line is below average. Their run game is below average. Their weaponry, other than Stephon Diggs, is fairly average. So for me, Josh Allen is a one-man wrecking crew, a one-man carry crew for the Bills, and I feel like he is an MVP type of player. Next, we've got Josh Dobbs. Dobbs, I would put as... This one's tough. I think you could argue he's basically a backup, but I actually feel like because of the expectation for Dobbs, you might put him in the below average category. Feels like he's had some good moments running the ball. Obviously, he's not in the best situation in the world, but I think his offensive line's kept him protected. I'd also argue that the Cardinals don't really expose him to anything crazy. They play it pretty safe. It's a pretty simple offense. They use his legs. He does some play action stuff. You know, he's accurate with the ball in the short, quick game. So overall, Dobbs has been better than I think I would have expected, but I think you still have to put him in the basically backup category. Justin Fields, I would probably also place into the basically backup. I feel like he's interesting because he has a lot of upper echelon physical talent, but his negatives are so negative that it make him an outright bad quarterback. Like, his processing is one of the worst in the league. His mechanics are down there. His just overall ability to see the field and make quick decisions and get the ball out and be on time in a passing rhythm game is bad. He's basically a pure runner that is a downfield shot type of player, and you might give him a couple routes to throw the ball to outside the pocket on the move. He can make great scrambles. Other than that, the guy is, that's why I would say Fields is like the type of backup you would want to come in for a couple of games. You got a very specific game plan. You utilize his legs. You throw some opponents off. You really attack them in that way. But he is not a guy that you consistently want. He doesn't win a lot of games. He turns the ball over a lot. There's just a lot of issues with Fields overall. I don't think he's a franchise quarterback. Justin Herbert. I would call Justin Herbert good this year. I don't think he's been very good. I don't think he's been elite or an MVP. I think he's been good. As of late, I think you could argue he's been mid. I think overall, though, the start of the year was very good for Herbert. Since he's gotten injured and lost Mike Williams, he hasn't played as well. He's been missing passes. I feel like his ability to make plays under pressure hasn't been the same degree. Feels like every fourth quarter he plays in, he doesn't make enough plays to win in the final drive. He takes a sack and it basically ends the drive. I've noticed that at least 3 times this year. And just as of late, he's missed too many receivers that he doesn't miss. So this is somewhat of a relation to what we've expected from him, which to me, I've always been a Herbert fan. I haven't been a Herbert stan, but I'm a fan of Herbert. I feel like he's a very good quarterback. I just feel like this year, he's been more up and down than we're used to. Next, we've got to talk about Kenny Pickett, who is really tough to figure out. I would argue that Kenny Pickett, this is tough. The problem with me for Kenny Pickett is I think he has the worst offensive coordinator in football. And the style of offense that the Steelers want to play is very like 2000s. It's very like run, pass. It's very, okay, we've got a great defense, don't turn the ball over, make a couple throws. It's a very tough style of quarterback to play, in my opinion. And at the same time, I feel like Pickett isn't necessarily a great athlete, a great specimen, but he also has a savviness to him that you respect. He's a bit of a gamer. And every time he's been asked to elevate his game in the fourth quarter, he has. So for that, I'm going to put him in below average. Because I think it would be disrespectful to put him in basically backup. Because I think there's been moments, and I feel like quarterback, when you're on a team like the Steelers, it's not necessarily about, are you consistently very good? It's more about like, in the moments we ask you to be good, are you good? And to me, Kenny Pickett has stepped up in those places. So unlike Derek Carr, who's maybe been more consistently pretty good, Pickett is somebody that's more been bad, but in the moments to win the games, he's been good. So that's kind of where I put him in below average. Next, we've got Kirk Cousins. Cousins, I would put in, this one's tough. It's between very good and good for me. I feel like the Niners game was MVP. Like, that's how good he was in that game. There's few pocket quarterback games we've seen over the last couple of years that have been as good as that game was from Kirk Cousins. At other times, I feel like he's had a top 10 offense this year. I would put him in the good. And I think the final reason is for his highs. I think overall you would say Cousins has not elevated his team to the degree where you would put him in the very good or definitely the MVP conversation, because he has a great supporting cast on offense. There's no debate. He has great receivers. He has a very good offensive line with arguably the best tackle duo in football. And sure, his run game isn't good, but he has enough there that if he was an MVP caliber quarterback, they would have an above 500 record. I don't really have to care about anything else. So for me, I like Cousins. I'm a fan of Cousins. Unlike a lot of people, I think he's a good player. I think he can win a Super Bowl. It's just not on the Vikings. The Vikings are just not good enough. Next, we're going to go, Kyler hasn't played yet. Lamar Jackson. This is without a doubt the thumbnail of the video, MVP. I think arguably best quarterback in the NFL right now, arguably. Obviously, we know what he can do running the football, but it's been the pass game that's been so impressive. His improvisation is up there with the best of him. His release is rapid. His pocket presence is exceptional. His ability to escape pressure is elite. His accuracy has been very, very good. And I think his composure in the stance of not under pressure, but his composure to stick with everything that's going on week to week, and understanding his receivers have kind of let him down this year. He's had a banged up offensive line. His ability to prioritize what's next and just be that guy that's steady in the Ravens organization has been very impressive. I think he's truly matured this year and has been what they got in the contract. I mean, everything they paid for, he's been and more. And he is one of those players that you have to game plan for at the quarterback position in a specific manner, which makes him one of the best, most dangerous players in the NFL. Next, we got Mac Jones, which I'm sure a lot of you guys have been waiting for in this video. Mac Jones, this one is maybe the most difficult one to rank because I think arguably Mac Jones I don't even know if it's arguable. I think Mac Jones has been in the worst situation in the NFL this year for a majority of the season. He's had a new offensive coordinator. Although we thought it would be an upgrade, it's a new offensive coordinator, period. It's a new system. His offensive line has been absolutely putrid. It's one of the bottom 3 in the NFL overall this season. He has had 0 running game. He has faced the toughest schedule in the NFL. He has faced numerous elite teams, from the Eagles to the Dolphins to the Cowboys. He faced an elite defense in the Saints. On top of the elite teams he's faced, he faced the Jets, which was a good defense. He hasn't really had a break all year, and the wins he's had is the Jets and the Bills, right? You think about the schedule they have faced. The only easy team they've played is one game below 500. That's the Raiders. And so it's been really tough for Mac because he's often on the worst team with the worst cast, and his receiving core, up until lately, right, with Devontae Parker, Juju Smith-Schuster, they are 2 of the worst receivers in the NFL. And to me, there's no debate. So I think collectively, overall, how has he played? I thought he played well against the Eagles. Like, good. To the degree I would put him in the good category against the Eagles. Against the Dolphins, I would say overall he was mid. Maybe a bit better than mid due to the pressure he saw in that game and some of the plays he made. But somewhere between good and mid. Then you go to the next couple of weeks where he slumps, right? He plays the Jets where he's decent. I would say he was mid in that game. He played Dallas where he was putrid, like he was backup level. He played the Saints. It was more of a team disaster, but he was probably basically a backup. And then, he plays the Raiders. I felt like he was, below average. And then this last game, he was very good against the Bills. So where do you put Mac? I think right now, overall, you would probably put him in the below average category. I think that's pretty fair. I feel like, talking about everything that's happened this year, his best games have been against the Bills, the Eagles, and the Dolphins. I think he will get better as the year goes on because he'll continue to learn this offense. Bill O'Brien's going to continue to put him in better positions to succeed. Feels like the offensive line's turning the corner. And the receiving core feels like they're understanding who to put out there with him. So he's been a product of his situation this year, but I think overall that means he's below average. Next up, we're going to go to Matthew Stafford. I think Stafford has been good. I think you could argue at times he's been very good, at other times he's been mid. But I think when you consider what Stafford's working with, below average offensive line, not very good defense, not a great running game, Cooper Kupp missing for most of the year. I think for you to look at what the Rams have done this year, some games have been better than others, but I think overall he's been really impressive. His pocket presence, his arm strength still pops off the screen consistently with one of the strongest arms in football. His ability to release the football from a multitude of angles is still at an elite level. His understanding of blitzes, where they're coming from, picking that up mentally is still up there. And I feel like he's had to carry the Rams more than he ever really has in his career before. So I would give him a lot of credit for that at the good level. Next, we've got Patrick Mahomes, which, of course, he's MVP caliber. I think early in the year, he wasn't great. I didn't think he played well against the Lions. I didn't think he played that well against Jacksonville. I think he played pretty poorly against the Jets. So there's definitely been some games where maybe he's not the true MVP best quarterback in the league this year. But overall, when you watch them play, there's a lot of Patrick Mahomes moving around, manipulating coverage, being patient, and then getting the ball out to his receivers and making special plays that only Mahomes can make. So there's a lot of that. There has been some struggles this year with the offense, with the new supporting cast. I think a lot of that has been about what's around him. But overall, I think what impresses me the most with Mahomes at this point in his career is his growth mentally as a player. I think his ability to see defenses and understand rapidly where to go with the ball in comparison to early in his career, where a lot of it was get the ball, hold on to it, wait. Okay, I'm going to scramble around, move to my right, move to my left, then make a quick sidearm crazy throw that everyone goes nuts about on TikTok. But now it feels like it's most plays are snap, read what's going to happen, snap, throw, like the best quarterbacks we've ever seen. And then there's also the subtlety of Mahomes where, okay, that read isn't open. I've got to buy some time. I'm going to scramble. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. That's where Mahomes has taken his game to the next level. Next, we've got Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson, I think this one's tough. I think he's been below average. I think some people are going to crucify him and rank him much lower. I think some people will maybe inflate what he's done due to his statistical production. I think at times he's been pretty bad, like that Chiefs game. I think other times he's been pretty good. But overall, I just don't think he really does anything to shift the momentum in any way for his team to win. Like, I just haven't seen that Russ in years. Feels like I haven't seen that difference-making MVP caliber Russ in many seasons. But he's definitely a guy that if he was on a good team, I feel like you could definitely win quite a few games with him. So physically, I still see the arm strength, enough of it. I still see enough mobility. It's just not to the level it used to be. And I think especially his quickness to be able to elude, change direction, make plays, that knack for making those crazy throws just isn't to the degree it used to be. But I think at times he's played in pretty good rhythm this year with Sean Payton. Definitely an improvement from last year. Next, got Ryan Tannehill. I think Tannehill, this one's tough. I think he's basically been a backup this year. I've been a Tannehill fan over the years. I think this year we've seen a bit of a drop-off in his ability from a mobility standpoint, from an arm strength standpoint. I think a lot of the times Tannehill hasn't necessarily made the throws, and a lot of his stuff in a good way has been very scheme and system based, and he doesn't really bring an elite trait to the table. I don't know if he ever has. There's been seasons where he's been a pretty explosive downfield passer. We don't really see that as much anymore. We don't really see that mobility that made him a receiver in his past. So to me, he's basically been a backup. I feel like if there were better backups on Tennessee, we would see that, but that's not necessarily the case for his situation. Haven't seen Sam Darnold yet. We might. PJ Walker. I mean, he's a backup, I would say. But I would say he's been better than Deshaun. And that's all I'll really say about that. He's a backup, but I actually think he was better than people gave him credit for when he initially started for the Browns. I actually didn't mind how he played for Carolina in the past. And I feel like he's showcased that. He can step in, he can win games, he can play a little bit. He hasn't really been a plus for the Browns, but they don't necessarily need him to be. They just need him to be steady. Sam Howell. Sam Howell, to me, has actually been probably below average. At times, he's been mid, but I would say below average because there's times he holds on to the ball, too long. I think part of it is that he gets hit and sacked a lot, and it's hard to make an evaluation one way or the other. But I think the thing I like about Howell is I think he brings a lot more athleticism than you would have thought. His arm certainly at times pops. His mobility pops. And to me, he's basically a better Taylor Heineken. He's got a savviness to him. He's got a toughness to him. He's got a scrambling ability to him. And he's gone through his struggles. I think the Bills game was probably the biggest struggle. But he's also had good moments. I thought he played really well against the Eagles earlier this year. So I'd put him in the below average category. And who else do we've got here? Am I missing anybody? Not sure I'm missing anybody. Zach Wilson, Tua, Lawrence. Okay, so let's go with Lawrence next. I'd put Lawrence in the mid category. I feel like Lawrence has been, at times, what we thought he would be this year, which is like really good. Obviously, he makes some explosive throws down the field with upper echelon arm strength. He can make some crazy throws. There's no doubt about it. And at other times, he can make plays with his legs. But I honestly think that the scheme gives him a lot more than people want to give it credit for. I think a lot of his production comes from the scheme, whether it's screen plays or easy passes to the flat, run after catch plays. I think there's things that a couple people, on Twitter will go through the Jags games and they'll be like, wow, look at this 1 or 2 throws that Lawrence made in this game. And the rest of the film is kind of pretty basic. And it's like, well, did Lawrence really impact this game at all? In other moments, I feel like he hasn't really done much to elevate his team. That's just at least in my opinion. Like, I feel like he's just been fairly average. At times, he's struggled with pressure, accuracy, getting to the right place at the right time with the ball. Maybe I have higher expectations for him, but it just feels like he's been fairly mid. There's been moments I like him. There's been moments I think he's not getting enough slack for the way the team's performing. So, early in the year, I thought it was a little rough. But as of late, it's been a bit better. But at the same time, I don't know. I just never really watched Jacksonville, and I'm like, wow, Trevor Lawrence has been really good. I don't know. I just haven't really done that this year. I think the Saints game, there was not times where I was like, oh, that looks like Lawrence from last year. But overall, I just feel like most of it's been, if the Jags have been clicking, it's because Doug Peterson's play calling has been clicking and not necessarily Trevor Lawrence. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but that's just me. Next, Tua. Tua obviously is probably in the best situation in the NFL. He has an exceptional offensive play caller, the best receiver of the decade, a great wide receiver too, and a nice little run game. And a couple other weapons too. I really like what Braxton Berrios has brought. Cedric Wilson has brought. They obviously the running backs, but I would say that Tua has been good this year. I think some people would say he's been very good, and I think you could argue that for sure. I wouldn't really get mad at you. I think overall Tua has been good, if not very good. I think the one thing that bugs me about Tua is the random turnover every game that he has. For as good as he's been with his accuracy and I think his anticipation and his ability to understand where to go with the ball, I think that's his biggest strength, his ability to read the field and then go where he needs to go with the ball most consistently, which is probably the biggest trait you can have as a quarterback. I mean, that's probably what made Tom Brady a GOAT, is just the ability to make a quick decision as fast as possible in the right place. Tua does that well, very well. And I feel like from a accuracy standpoint, he's up there as well. The things I'll say about Tua is, from an ad-libbing perspective, he's not great. From a play breakdown perspective, we just haven't seen it very much because the scheme and the weapons are so good that he's never really forced out of his comfort zone. So that's where it kind of makes me say, well, the guy's been so good in structure, so good when everything's going well. And we just haven't seen when things aren't going well very often, other than the Bills and the Eagles games. And he was okay in those games, but not MVP level like maybe the rest of the games have been. So Tua's a tricky one because a lot of it is how much is the scheme, how much is Tyreek, how much is Tua. It's a tough thing. For me, I would put him in good with a shade towards very good, as opposed to mid. Finishing off the tier list, Zachary Wilson. Zach Wilson season it is. I'm going to put Zach Wilson in all seriousness. Not at the I don't know if he's basically a backup. Honestly, yeah, he is. Okay. Not going to lie. I think he's better than a backup. I'd put him at basically backup because honestly, there's not that many quarterbacks, I think, on the Jets that would actually be really good. Maybe 2 in the entire NFL. The offensive line is not good. The receiving core is not good. Garrett Wilson's the only good player there, in my opinion. The offense is extremely basic. I think Zach Wilson has been a blessing in the way of his mobility, because I think if Aaron Rodgers was back there, he would have been sacked a ton. There's no doubt. Now, would Rodgers get the ball out quicker, make more crisp throws more consistently? Probably be overall better, yes. But Zach Wilson, I think, has been better than people want to give him credit for. He hasn't turned the ball over. He's made a few big plays every single game, and he has won some big games for this team. So he hasn't really gotten the way of what their strength is, which I want to give him credit for, in almost a Mark Sanchezian way. Back with the Jets in his day. It feels like Zach is kind of playing that role now, where he knows this is a run-first team, this is a defensive team. He doesn't have to do too much, but he has done enough to actually help them in a positive fashion. So, and to couple that with maturity, the guys have matured, which is nice to see. So, Zach, I honestly feel like if this team goes to the playoffs, he's probably got to reach the below average level. But I feel like being basically a solid backup as compared to what his history was probably being a bad backup or like a just unplayable player is good. So that is the tier list, guys. My quarterback tier list. My next video will be my coaches tier list, ranking every coach in the NFL so far this season. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, let me know in the comments section below where I was right, where I was wrong, and Gronk spiked the like button. Peace.